Okay. Thank you very much, Maddie. And I also just want to take a moment to just thank Emmanuel as well for the opportunity to come here and to talk with all of you, and hopefully be able to provide some information that's helpful in being able to understand how you can utilize your international education here in the U.S. I'm really excited to see so many folks joining in. I realize the deck will be shared out, so hopefully others can have access to the information as well. I also noticed that I have a few of my WES colleagues that are on this webinar, so certainly want to thank them for joining. And if there's anything that you guys also feel like should be shared, encourage you to also do so since you guys are here today. And so again, my name is Deborah Means West. I'm from World Education Services, which is known as WES for short. And today I'm really just going to spend some time with all of you guys talking about credential evaluation, some tools and some resources that are available to be able to assist individuals that have international education and are looking to be able to move forward with it here in the US. So Maddie, if you can go to the next slide. So I've introduced myself. I would certainly welcome the opportunity if folks wanted to just drop into the chat. If you're at a computer, if you're on a mobile device and you're able to do so, by all means, I always think that it's a little bit friendly and very inviting if I'm able to see sort of the folks that are in the room. So feel free if you want to put your name into the chat, type it in there. And while you're doing that, next slide. I'm just going to share a little bit about WES for those of you that may not be familiar. But before I do that, actually, I do want to be able to just acknowledge that I'm joining all of you today from Brooklyn, New York. I want to be able to make sure that there is a sense of recognition, honor in recognizing the land in which I am actually coming to you from today and recognize its indigenous roots. And so certainly just want to acknowledge where all of you are actually joining us from today. So certainly in your introductions, if you wanted to drop into the chat, not only your name, but also the location that you're dialing in from. Thanks. I'm seeing some stuff drop into the chat. That's great. Next slide. Oh, we have some folks from Canada as well on the call. This is fantastic. All right. So WES is an organization that operates in the United States as well as in Canada for the Toronto folks that are on this call. And WES is an organization that I guess the best way to describe us is that we are a social enterprise that works towards a vision that is centered around enabling people to learn, work, and to thrive in new places. And we do this by supporting individuals in their educational, their economic, and their social inclusion efforts. For the last 50 years, WES has been achieving this through offering services that center around international credential evaluations. And in this work, we've supported millions of individuals as they have sought to achieve their academic and professional goals. And so really happy to be, also on the social impact side of WES, being able to help individuals in understanding how they can use their skills, they can leverage their training, and they can achieve their academic and their professional goals through the information and the resources of not only WES, but also a breadth of partners that WES has in the United States, as well as in Canada. Next slide. So what I want to do is I want to be able to sort of frame the issue and why it is that credential evaluations are even a resource and a tool that's helpful for individuals that have international education. Next slide. So when typically we talk about individuals that have skills and experience in the United States, it often occurs that individuals may not be able to fully use their skills and their education in a way that aligns to the skills and their experience before they arrived in the US. And common times an issue that erupts is one that's called skill underutilization. And what specifically that means is that an individual may have post-secondary or further than high school education. Maybe they have university, college level education. They have professional experience for which maybe they've worked several years at being able to establish their professional experience. But even though they have the education and the experience, sometimes their skills are not being recognized. And so when an individual's skills are not recognized, they may often find themselves in a situation of either unemployment or what is called underemployment. And those two things are forms of skill underutilization. And it's important to talk about that and to be able to identify that as an issue, because when we talk about some of the ways in which individuals can try to prevent or limit instances of skill underutilization, we'll find that there are some solutions and some resources that are available, of which credential evaluations is also one of those resources that is available. Next slide. So I wanted to share this slide because I think that it could be very helpful for individuals when you're trying to understand whether or not this is an experience that you alone are encountering. And this slide helps to be able to understand that when we look at the number of individuals in the United States that have post-secondary or college level education and that are experiencing underemployment or unemployment, we know that the numbers are significant. According to information from a research institute called the Migration Policy Institute, it's estimated that around 2 million college-educated immigrants and refugees in the United States are unemployed or underemployed. And you'll notice on the bottom of this slide, it specifically talks as well about the percentage of that 2 million that have credentials that were earned overseas. And so again, the reason why I thought it was helpful to be able to talk about this is because sometimes individuals may feel as though their experience, just a reminder, if folks can please mute, thank you so much, is that sometimes people might feel as though it's an experience that is not shared by others. And information and data like this is helpful because it lets you recognize that you're not alone, but also that as a result of the data, there are resources and services that are out there that certainly can support yourself or others in your community that might be experiencing this. Next slide. So wanted to include this because I also think it's very helpful to be able to identify what some of the common barriers are for individuals in being able to become more economically included and to advance in their careers based on the skills and the experience that they have. And so when we talk about some of the barriers that exist, some of these might be barriers that each of you are acutely aware of. And I'd almost encourage some of you, if you wanted, to put into the chat what might be some of the barriers that you specifically encounter. And then as a result of where I sit and where I'm joining you from, which is World Education Services, I'm going to hone in or focus in on the credential evaluation piece. But I'd welcome folks, put into the chat, what are some of the barriers that you're aware of on a structural level or at a systems level? We know and we have heard that oftentimes there are insufficient, there's oftentimes unaffordable, and sometimes there are workforce and adult education training programs that might not necessarily be as aligned to helping individuals that do have post-secondary education. We also know that sometimes there are barriers that exist in terms of systemic inequities, such as racism, xenophobia, and nativism. And there's programs and resources to support this. And also there are policy opportunities to be able to advocate for some change. We also know that because sometimes there's limited infrastructure with small to medium-sized employers, sometimes they might not have the capacity or the resources to fully support immigrants and refugees at the right level of employment for which an individual has their skills and experience. And then for those of you that are joining that may be looking to pursue licensed occupations, maybe that's in healthcare, maybe that's in education, oftentimes there's some restrictions in those licensing policies that often make it a little challenging. Certainly, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the resources that are available to address some of those barriers, but I also would be remiss if I didn't talk about some individual barriers that can present. A lack of limited English proficiency or limitations in one's English fluency can sometimes be presenting as a barrier. And so the great news there is that there are programs, there are resources, there are services to be able to support individuals. A lack of U.S. experience or education, for which it's great that there are programs like ABN that provide opportunities for folks to build on their U.S. work experience. Insufficient social capital and networks. I'm sure that if I, were to ask folks how they found out about jobs, a lot of individuals may say that it's because of who they knew. It was because of their professional network. Sometimes that's challenging if you're new in an area and you may not necessarily have an established professional network. It makes it difficult sometimes to find out about opportunities or to know how to apply for opportunities. And so again, recognizing that sometimes that can present itself as a barrier, being able to connect with and to become engaged with programs such as programs like African Bridge Network, it's a great way to be able to expand one's network. And certainly just by the volume of folks that I see on this webinar today, I think there's a wealth of professional and social capital networks that are available to be able to engage upon. I mentioned that we're going to talk about the inadequate recognition of credentials. I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about how to overcome that barrier through, engaging with organizations and agencies that offer credential evaluation services. And then the last two that are on here, I just also want to be able to give some voice to. But oftentimes there are barriers with a limited access to training and workaround supports. And recognizing that depending upon the location that one resides in, depending upon the type of training that someone might be looking for, there may be limitations, which again is why it's very helpful to be able to think about and to ask questions of yourself in terms of what it is that you are wanting to do in terms of your career advancement, and knowing where and who to talk with about what's available that you may be able to engage upon. And then the last one that's listed down here, which can oftentimes as well be experienced as a barrier, is an inadequate career guidance. Certainly this is where it's very important and very helpful to be able to engage with programs like ABN that specifically can provide that career guidance so that you're leveraging and building upon the experience that you have, and also that you're gaining some insight in terms of what some of the appropriate next steps should be that one would take to be able to foster their career navigation. Next slide. So when we're talking about facilitating the inclusion of folks just like you, all that are joining here today that have international education and experience, wanted to be able to insert this slide to be able to talk about some of the things that exist, some of the resources that exist that can really support one in being able to address some of the barriers that we talked about on the slide prior. When it comes down to English proficiency, certainly want to give a shout out to community colleges. There are a lot of really beneficial programs that community colleges can offer that really can support individuals in being able to improve their English proficiency, but also to be able to understand how there are programs that might be able to support folks in a specific occupational context. There might be programs that are offered at community colleges, at public libraries, or in partnership with organizations that center their work on workforce training. There might be some really great programs. So being able to sort of know what's available is going to be really helpful for individuals that are wanting to be able to advance in their career options. It's also super helpful to be aware of the value of conversation partnerships, of intensive courses, but also volunteering. It's a great way to be able to build upon your language fluency and to be able to also build your network of professional contacts, your social networks. U.S. work experience, it was one of the barriers listed on the other slide. And again, these are just some of the options that we think are important for folks to consider when you're considering building that U.S. work experience. At some community colleges in their classes, there's not only the theory or the knowledge of what the subject is you're pursuing, but oftentimes there might be a practical element in which you're having a hands-on opportunity to be able to learn. And so that's a great way that you can build some U.S. experience, but also you can have some U.S. related experience in an educational setting that's provided for folks. Volunteering and internships as well as apprenticeships, these are also really great things that I want to encourage individuals that are joining today to be aware of and to just consider as great resources to be able to also support your inclusion. Oftentimes, individuals might think of internships as being things that are only provided when you're pursuing further study, but the reality is that there's great internships and apprenticeship opportunities that could be short-term in nature, but that can really help you in being able to build that U.S. experience, as well as being able to demonstrate and to gain some more recent skills and experience in your career search. The other thing that's here is certification and degree programs. I think that's also just really important to recognize for building U.S. experience, because many times you might find that if you're listing down on your resume that you have some localized certifications that can speak to the context in the state or in the environment that you're looking to apply, it can be a really great benefit for folks. And so also recognizing the value of engaging with some of your local certifications that could be offered through community colleges. And certainly if you're looking to pursue higher education, just recognizing that some degree programs could also be worth exploring. When we're talking about social capital, again, just being able to recognize some ways in which we can facilitate, building our social capital through networking. I'm sure that there are some events that ABN puts on, but also being able to see if there's some professional associations. If you're, someone that's looking to actually establish yourself as an educator, because that was what you did before arriving into the United States, there might be a professional association in your area that can support individuals that are wanting to get back into the education space. Seeing if they have some events that are actually on their calendar for which you can join. Mentorship programs, volunteering programs. Not only, is it a great way for you to be able to give back to communities or for you to be able to support other individuals with their learning, but there's also a real value in being able to maintain those relationships that you establish through those opportunities and being able to leverage those so that you can actually pursue some greater career advancement opportunities. And then the last one, credential recognition. I think it's really important at the start to be able to understand what it is that you're wanting to do in terms of your career advancement. If, again, it's for pursuing licensure, asking yourself that question and understanding that depending upon the license you're seeking to pursue, the state in which you reside, there might be specific requirements that are necessary for pursuing a credential recognition for licensed occupations. If you're looking to go for higher education and you want to be able to leverage your prior experience in a learning environment for a credit transfer, certainly there's also going to be a need to understand that you want to do that, understand what college program you want to apply to or university program you want to apply to, and then understand what specific agencies will be accepted for a credential evaluation to demonstrate that you actually can transfer some of your credit. It's also important to understand if you're looking to pursue employment, because if you're looking to pursue employment, then there certainly are different types of evaluations that could be helpful in being able to demonstrate to an employer that you meet the basic requirements of satisfying what maybe their requirement is for a job, that you at least hold a bachelor's degree. A credential evaluation could be a great way for you to demonstrate that. So again, it's helpful to understand what specifically you're seeking a credential evaluation for. Next slide. So now let's dig a little bit into credential recognition and credential evaluation. Next slide. So I thought it could be very interesting just to ask a question of all of you. And so for those of you that do have the ability to chat or to use your keyboard to chat a response, I'm interested to see how many folks maybe want to guess at what they think a credential recognition is. And so we've got a couple of choices here. And so is a credential recognition A, the details of U.S. equivalency of education completed abroad? Is it B, the verification of the authenticity of education credentials? Or is it C, the acceptance of academic credentials earned abroad, or a credential evaluation report as determined by the receiving institution? I know that for those of you that may have some access to a keyboard, it'd be really interesting to see how many of you potentially want to hazard a guess here. And I see that some folks are putting it in. So, yep, if we can go to the next slide. So credential recognition, as is described on the slide, it refers to the acceptance of a credential evaluation or a credential. So for those of you that did say C, that's exactly right. Recognition refers to the acceptance of the academic credential that was earned abroad or the credential evaluation report. And examples of those that would accept that credential or the decision makers that would determine what they're accepting are employers, its licensing bodies, or its academic institutions, which is really those colleges or those universities that you might be looking to apply to. When we talk about the evaluation, I thought it could be really helpful just to be able to outline exactly what a credential evaluation report is. A credential evaluation report is a document that compares international academic credentials or qualifications to standards in the U.S. It provides a U.S. academic equivalency, and it helps institutional recipients to better understand the academic background of individuals who hold credentials earned abroad. So what does that mean? A credential evaluation report is really helpful because, as an example, in the U.S., many grading scales are based on a 4.0 grading scale. It might be that the university that you actually graduated from and hold your degree from, they might have had a different scale. Maybe it was not a 4-point grade scale, to which the highest grade that one receives is at the 4.0 level, and that a lower grade that one receives is at a lower level. So it's really important, especially if you're looking to pursue further education, that you have a way of being able to demonstrate to a university or a college what specifically your educational degree is equal to in terms of a U.S. equivalency. It's also helpful because certainly if you're wanting to pursue employment and a job description, for example, might indicate indicate that it wants someone to apply that has a bachelor's degree or has an associate's level degree. An evaluation report can actually provide the language that indicates what specifically your degree equals. I think it's important to note that evaluations, they are advisory in nature, and that's why it's so important to understand where the recognition really comes in at. And the recognition, again, it really comes from those that are evaluating what it is that you're sharing. And that's the academic institution, the licensing body, or in some instances, the employer. Next slide. So this slide as well, just thought it would be really helpful for individuals to be able to get a better sense as to who those decision makers are, but also what are some of the suggestions that we offer in terms of once you recognize what it is that you're looking to do and who it is that you're wanting to have recognize your international credentials. For employers, a credential evaluation, again, is a really easy way for an employer to understand your education earned outside of the U.S. A tip, and I'm sure this is something that ABN certainly works with its clients on, but we encourage that folks actually indicate on their resume that they do actually have a report that demonstrates that their degree from their home country or from the country that they were educated in is equivalent to a U.S. bachelor's degree or a graduate degree, again, depending upon what the evaluation report says. The middle column, for those of you, like the individual that chatted in that they were an engineer, if you're looking to pursue a regulated occupation, a credential evaluation is really probably one of the key steps to being able to move forward in the licensing process. I think it's really important here to understand that each state has its own process for how they actually will accept and who they actually will accept credential evaluation reports from. So it's really important to understand if you are pursuing a regulated occupation, that you are reaching out to your state board of licensing. Certainly, if it's engineering, you're reaching out to the state boards of engineers, depending upon what type of engineer you are, if that's a civil engineer or an electrical. If you're looking for a healthcare related license, maybe you are a nurse, it's important to reach out to the state board of nursing because there will be specific requirements and specific guidance that's offered for, again, who and how they will accept credential evaluation reports. So it's important to ask yourself those questions and to understand it first because it will save you time as well as saving you additional cost if in fact you end up achieving or pursuing rather a credential evaluation report from an institution that's not accepted by that state licensing board. The last one that I want to highlight is just colleges and universities. And so there are varying levels of programs and admissions offices within colleges and universities. And so it's really important that when you're pursuing further education, as a first thing, I think you always want to be able to find out what the admissions office accepts in terms of their credential evaluation. For international students or for individuals that are internationally educated and that are applying to specific programs. It could even be that within the same university and within the same college, two different programs, maybe the School of Business and then the School of Allied Health, they may specifically have different agencies that they will accept. So it's always important to make sure that if you're pursuing college or university further study, that you're specifically asking the university admissions department what it is that they will accept. Next slide. Just a reminder to folks too, if you can please mute just so we can ensure that everyone's able to hear, that would be greatly appreciated. Wanted to be able to share this. There are different types of evaluations reports, so I'm just going to talk about two. There's a document by document, which you'll notice underneath, we've sort of listed some ways in which a document by document evaluation is typically used. generally for first year admissions to an undergraduate or a bachelor's level program, as well as for employment. If you really want to be able to just demonstrate that you have met, for example, the requirement of having a high school diploma or a high school equivalency, if you're applying to graduate school and you want to demonstrate that you have a bachelor's degree already, a document by document could be a helpful resource for being able to establish that. Again, for employment purposes, if you're wanting to demonstrate to an employer that you meet the requirements of the job description and that you hold a bachelor's degree, if that's what it's asking for, a document by document is going to be a useful report to consider. A course by course is also an evaluation report that could prove helpful if you're looking to transfer into another program and maybe you want to demonstrate that you've already satisfied some of the requirements of that program. A course by course report will indicate which courses you've already taken as a result of your international study. For graduate school, maybe the program that you're applying to has what are termed prerequisite courses, so they want to find out whether or not you've already satisfied something. A course by course evaluation can help you in being able to demonstrate that maybe you can get what's called advanced standing so that you can apply at a more appropriate level for a graduate school program. And then the last one is licensure. It may be the case that a state licensing board would indicate that they want to see if you have satisfied certain course requirements to be able to sit a licensing examination or to be able to advance in the next steps of licensure. And so a course by course evaluation may be the type of report that is requested. Again, I think it's really important to remember that for either a document by document or a course by course, you're asking the organization what it is that they would require. Certainly for employment purposes, it might be a little bit more challenging unless you actually have a specific request that's coming from the organization in terms of what document you need. But certainly if you're applying for a regulated position with a licensing board, they can actually indicate and advise you which one of the reports they prefer. And if you're going back for college or university, they'll also be very specific about the type of report that they would require. Next slide. Choosing a credential evaluation service. I think this slide is very helpful because at the start, I want to make sure that if there's a big takeaway that you each have, it's that there is no universally accepted credential evaluation service. And why it's important to state that is because, again, if you're applying for a license, if you're looking to go back and do further education, there might be a specific agency that licensing board or that university requires. And they may say that they don't take the one that you were considering getting a credential evaluation service from. So it's always important to ask the question first so that you can make sure that you're not assuming that one evaluation agency can actually provide the necessary evaluation report for what it is that you're seeking to pursue. That leads me to the next one, which is always check with your schools, with employers, with professional licensing boards to make sure that you're finding out what it is that they require. Again, because there's time that's involved with being able to get a credential evaluation report, but there's also an upfront cost. Costs do vary depending upon the type of service that you're requesting, as well as the type of area of specialization. And so different agencies that provide credential evaluations, they have different costs as well. So being able to make sure that you're checking first will certainly make sure that you're not spending cost that might not necessarily get you the end result that you're seeking. The last point here that I want to just highlight is that if in fact you are wanting to make sure that at least you're identifying a reputable service, being able to remind yourself that the National Association for Credential Evaluation Services is a great resource is probably a really good thing to do. NACES is an organization that basically would help you in being able to make sure that you're not utilizing the evaluation services of maybe an organization that is not highly regarded, is not accepted, and honestly might not be providing you with the value that you would be expecting. I know sometimes it's very common that we go online, we Google things, and usually the first thing that rises to the top might be what we think is the most appropriate thing for us to pursue. A lot of times that's not going to be the legitimate offering, and so what we want to do is make sure that in instances where we might have a question or a doubt around a credential evaluation agency, if we're not able to find out from checking with an employer or checking with a professional licensing or a university, that at least we're utilizing the National Association of Credential Evaluation Services to be able to check that the organization that we're seeking to get that evaluation from is in fact at least legitimate. Next slide. One of the other things that I wanted to be able to share is just some additional resources that might help folks that are looking to actually navigate some career pathway options. And so these next few slides are just going to be some extra resources that WES has available that I thought could also be helpful to just share with you all this morning. Next slide. So we have a list of PDF guides that are on our website. They're free to download, as well as an interactive tool that all sits on this career pathways page. The page itself provides guidance and resources for individuals that are seeking to utilize their skills and experience in the U.S. The tools are actually available for individuals that are seeking information on maybe what some alternatives could be to pursuing their skills and experience here in the U.S. Maybe they're looking to find out what some related occupations are, but also maybe they're looking to find out what specifically might be some of the regulated or the licensing steps. And so these pathway resources are really helpful because they actually focus on about 14 sectors or 14 professions, and they provide information and access to resources that can really help each of you in being able to understand what some of your career navigation options might be. Next slide. This is just to provide you all with a little bit of an overview of what this career guides, the PDF e-guides are going to contain. As you'll see over on the screen to my right, they have strategies for achieving career success. They have links to resources for professional success, as well as the requirements for licensing. Again, recognizing that licensing takes part on specifically a state-to-state basis. The guides themselves are really going to provide an overview at the national level, which could be really helpful for individuals that might be looking to at least get some initial understanding and guidance around specifically what might be required in their state. There's case studies because, again, we recognize that there's always a value in being able to understand from individuals that have actually lived the experience of being able to take their international experience or their skills and be able to apply it. And so we've got some great case studies that are in there, as well as, again, just understanding that sometimes there are real value in being able to understand the alternative career options that could be available. The guides also set out some great alternative career options for folks to explore. Next slide. This slide right here, and again, I know that Maddie's going to be sharing out the deck, but we did put in some links to some other standalone one-page resources that could also be very helpful for folks. The first one is just planning for success, being able to understand what maybe some things are that you want to take into account and consideration as you're looking at career pathway options in the U.S. For those of you that might want to be able to just read up on what are the differences between regulated and non-regulated or non-licensed occupations, we have a resource that's available for that. If exploring related and alternative careers is something that you may actually want to be able to learn a little bit more about, we have a one-pager on that. And then the last one is really just a document that we put together that really helps individuals understand what it means when you do have your international education recognized. And so those are some free links to resources that we thought could also be helpful to pass along and to share. Next slide. These last few slides are just some other resources that I think could be helpful for folks. And so next slide. Through WES, we generally and more regularly, we publish research, we have surveys, we have policy recommendations, blogs. There is a whole host and wealth of resources that we have available that are all free to access. So by this link, you can go on and you can look at the library of information that we have that hopefully can provide some additional guidance and information to each of you as you're looking to pursue either further education or career advancement here in the U.S. Next slide. We have a newsletter for those of you that might be interested in subscribing to our newsletter. So there'll be a link that will be shared out and provided to all of you with that. And then next slide. This is also a great slide that I really want to encourage all of you to engage with. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, again, once you've asked the right questions, once you realize that potentially a WES credential evaluation may be the right step for you to pursue, there's a link here that talks about the evaluations and the fees that are attached with getting a credential evaluation. We also highlight what typically the required documents would be if in fact you are pursuing a WES credential evaluation. We also on the top and to the right on my screen, there is a free degree equivalency tool. So if you wanted to just take a look and see specifically based on your country of education, based on the degree that you have, what specifically would be the equivalency or what would your degree equal? Again, for informational purposes, we have a free tool. And then towards the bottom row, we have digital badges, which also is a great resource that I encourage individuals to take a look at to be able to sort of use on things like your social media profiles. We have a WES iGPA calculator, again, recognizing that in the US, the grading scale is going to vary and it may be different than the grading scale that was employed in the country in which you were educated in. And so if you wanted to be able to see what your grade point average might be the equivalent to, there's a tool to help you do that. And then the Career Pathways resource, which we talked about and I shared before. And I think, honestly, the next slide might just be a wrap to questions. There's a little bit of a preview here for the degree equivalency tool, but I won't go into more detail. Folks can certainly just take a look at that when the deck is shared. But this is basically what the tool itself looks like. So you'll recognize it when you go on there. But yeah, I know we've got just a few minutes left, and certainly if there are some questions, I want to thank my WES colleagues because I see that there might have been a few questions more specific to credentials that came through. So thank you, Katie, for fielding those questions. I appreciate that. And yeah, if there's any other questions that folks might want to jump off of mute, if that's okay for them to do, Maddie, happy to see if we can answer some questions. And if there are questions that we're unable to answer, I definitely will make sure that my contact information is shared out as well. And so happy to be able to see if we can get a response to any questions that, again, I might not be able to answer on the spot today.
All right, yeah, I want to open it up. Thank you, Deborah, so much. That was extremely valuable information. I'm sure it was very educational to most people here today. So if anyone has questions about evaluation, about WES, I just want to open it up for these last couple of minutes and let you guys ask your questions. So go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing that I also want to say while folks are maybe thinking of some questions, coming back to the cost, I also just want folks to be aware that oftentimes, especially if you are someone that's receiving services or you're enrolled in a workforce program, there oftentimes are funds that can actually be provided to support in the cost of a credential evaluation. So for those of you that might be in an English language program, maybe asking if there's some funding that could be available through that program that you're involved in. Again, if you're in a workforce program, seeing whether or not there might potentially be some funds that can be applied to support you and being able to cover those credential evaluation cost. Want to make sure I just flag that as well, because I know that financial considerations is sometimes also a very relevant issue for many folks. And so I do see a question there around a master's, I think in I'm not even going to try the MBBS from Russia. How can I do a credential evaluation? So, Omer, what I would say you probably want to do first is you would want to be able to just make sure you're asking, yourself specifically what it is that you want to have the credential evaluation for. And again, if it's for the purposes of being able to apply for jobs that can recognize and that will accept that you have, if the M is for a master's, then definitely I think you can apply by going onto the WES website or going onto a website of an agency that would be accepted. If you're actually asking the question, though, because you want to go into an education program and you want them to be able to accept that you have this degree from a Russian university, then you would need to speak to the admissions department first, just to make sure that, in fact, you understand which type of an agency they'll accept it from. And actually, I see Katie. Actually, thank you. She responded to that question. Irene, I see your hand is up.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I am just wondering, again, I'm Irene from Uganda, and I hold a Bachelor of Arts with Education and a Master's in Gender. Now, my experience is a lot in the NGO world, human rights education, social work generally. Now, I would want to embark on maybe something like employment, and my question is around securing evaluation from WES. If I am able to do that evaluation and I attach it on my document, and you do it for me and I attach it to my documents with my resume and everything, do you think that would be good enough for me to look for employment around, where I am in Massachusetts now, in the NGO world, or still need a little more than that?
It's a really good question, and I would say that the first thing you would want to do, especially because there could be a variety of jobs within the NGO space, from maybe a trainer to a program manager, to maybe an instructor, just recognizing some of the things I heard you say. It's always important to look at the job description and to see exactly what it is that the job is requiring in terms of your experience, but also in terms of their requirements. And if in fact their requirement is that you have to be able to demonstrate years of experience as well as educational knowledge, then sure, a credential evaluation would really be helpful, because if in fact you want to be able to say that you have the minimum requirement met, which is a master's or a bachelor's degree, you know that you would have that. There are some instances where maybe one gets a bachelor's degree, but it's 3 years of study. And so the 3 years in the US may not actually equal a bachelor's degree. And so a credential evaluation would help somebody, because then they maybe know that they actually don't have the bachelor's degree that the job description is stating they need. And so at least then they can maybe talk to that if they were actually offered an interview. So I guess I'm saying all this because it could be valuable to get it and to put it attached to your documentation and your resume. But I think first and foremost, you would want to know exactly what the job is saying it requires. Falling back on the credential evaluation is helpful, because at least then you know what type of jobs you technically can apply for based on their educational criteria. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Okay, great. Again, I know we're at the top of the hour. I want to respect everybody's time. Thank you so much, Maddie. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for the opportunity. Thank you to my colleagues that joined as well, and Katie for putting in some responses to the questions. If there are any other questions that do come up, Maddie, please feel free to reach out to myself. I'm happy to be able to make sure that we can provide a response to folks. So happy to coordinate that for you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again so much, Deborah. And thank you to everyone else that was here today from WES that were answering questions in the chat. I really appreciate you guys for being here. Just like Deborah said, if anyone has additional questions, because I know we are low on time, please email them to me and I can connect you with Deborah to answer those questions. I will be sending out both the WES slides as well as the ABM slides. So you'll have all that. I'm also going to be uploading this recording and resending that out to you guys as well. So if you want to revisit anything on here, feel free, but you'll be getting all the content from today. And I want to thank you all again so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And I hope that this was informative and you guys got your questions answered on credential evaluation. All right.
Thank you again.
Thank you everyone for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. A good day to you too.